Welcome back, Cory.
Thanks for having me. This is number 3. I am now the official most recurred guest on Bookworm.
That's true. Although I think we're going to have to take that title from you because I don't think you're going to be a guest anymore. Well, I'll take this opportunity to announce to the world that Cory is going to be the new Bookworm co-host.
Yeah.
Been really happy with the conversations that we've had. And as I told Cory, I was really looking for somebody that I had good chemistry with, and we could develop that camaraderie that made Bookworm special over 186 episodes or 185, whatever, with Joe. And right from the beginning, we started having some great conversations. So I'm excited to have you join the podcast officially, Cory, and excited about where Bookworm is going to go next.
Well, I was excited when you asked, and I was excited when I got even the opportunity to guest on it because, I'd listened to Bookworm for a long time, and I just wanted to, just get to know you better and get to know Joe better. It's funny because I've talked about this before, but you have these people in your ear, right? And you're listening to them and you feel like you have this relationship with them, but you don't really have a relationship with them. What you have is you have a tiny little speck into their mind. And no, I'm just grateful. It's a ton of fun to read the books. It's a ton of fun to talk with you about them. And it's a ton of fun to learn, about life and about, learn together, I guess, if you will, learning community, as we'll get to later on in our book today. So thanks, Mike. The whole point of that is thanks for trusting me and thanks for having me. And I look forward to 1,000 more episodes if you want to do that.
Hey, I'll keep reading books as long as your game.
Yep.
Yeah, you kind of hit on something that's important, and one of the reasons that I really like podcasting in particular, and why I really love Bookworm specifically, is when you listen to a podcast, you feel like you have a seat at the table. And so for a long time, I was listening to podcasts by my internet heroes, is the term that I used. And you do that long enough and you just keep growing, you keep developing your skills, and eventually you get a chance to contribute. And so I feel kind of honored that I have people who look up to me in that sense. And so I love the Bookworm podcast. I love the growth that comes from reading these books. And if I can help facilitate that in anybody else's life, I'm going to do that as long as I possibly can.
Well, and one of the things I want to say is, I don't want to put too much of a spotlight on you because I know your personality, I know your style, but it's truly that situation where you listen to it and you think, how could I do that? Like, how could I get there? How could I do something similar to that? And you feel at times like it's daunting. It's like, oh, I can't. Like, there's no way I could do that. But like, it's truly one of those, start playing around with it, start networking with people, start talking with people. And it's funny how I didn't expect this conversation to happen, but how much this conversation ties into the book that we're going to read today. Is you do these little prototypes and you do these little like smaller experiments, and it's interesting the way things sometimes unfold, like not always, but the way things sometimes unfold. So, yes, I would say that you are one of my podcasting heroes. That's very true. I listened to you on Focus. I listened to you here, and it was like, oh, how could I do similar thing to what Mike does? And now you just invited me to do that long term on Bookworm. So I'm pretty jazzed about it. So thank you very much.
Well, I've shared this. I think I actually shared this in the Relay FM Spotlight because I got to do that recently with Kathy Campbell. That I mentioned, the internet heroes thing. I remember specifically, I was walking the streets of my neighborhood one night with my wife and just kind of like dreaming, and was like, wouldn't it be awesome if someday I had a podcast on Relay FM? What if I could podcast with David Sparks? And then he was listening to Bookworm and he started sending me these encouraging notes every once in a while via email. And that eventually led to me interviewing him for the productivity show back when I was doing that. And the relationship was built from there. But I've had people who have done that for me. So I feel an obligation to pay that forward. And I try to do that to the best of my ability. Probably not as great as I could be, but I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Can I distract us for one more second? Because I have to get your opinion on this. So the hot news right now, right? And nobody's really talking about it from the productivity side. So who am I going to talk to? I'm going to talk to the faith-based productivity guy, right?
Okay.
So Apple Vision Pro, do you think it has any chance in the first couple months, in the first 6 months, year, whatever it is, to be an actual legitimate productivity tool? And I
Hmm.
biased my question in the way I asked it. I know I did.
Well, it's hard to say with the definition without having a definition of a legitimate productivity tool. Like, what do you? Because I think it will be a helpful productivity tool. Uh, just like it's helpful to have your home office to eliminate distractions. You strap that thing on your face, and if you can do your work at the same level as you normally would on a computer and a monitor, that could be a big focus and productivity boon just by, I have this thing that I'm looking at and nothing else. I think over the first several months, there's not going to be very many of them. I feel like the initial apps for them are going to be not great. If you're just using Apple's apps, then which is totally a legitimate way to be productive, calendar reminders, pages, things like that, then you could probably do quite a bit there. But I think the third party support is really where it's going to take off for people like me. And just frankly, I have zero interest in that product.
Okay. Okay. See, I'm different than that, but okay, go ahead.
That's basically it. Like, I think it will actually be a big thing over time. $3,500 is way too much for anybody but a raving early adopter to go buy. But over time, I think the price is going to come down, and it's gonna find its place. The Apple Watch didn't know what it was at first either. Remember the digital touch thing that was part of the three main features
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
nobody I think ever used.
Yep, I agree.
So, but this I think is going to be bigger, a lot bigger than the Apple Watch. I think it is going to revolutionize the VR headset game. It's going to cause things like the Oculus to improve dramatically. But I think it's going to be several years before this is, part of the normal repertoire for knowledge workers or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean the $3,500 starting price tag is a really big mountain to climb because
Yep.
I mean what I would love is I would love to have the book in the space and then the mind map in the space and be able to like be doing that in a more native fashion. But when I think about the fact that I can do that with a computer right now, right? Like if I put the book on I mean, I don't read paper, right? So if I put the book on the left half of the screen, I put the mind map on the right half of the screen, I can do that right now. And I have a tool that costs way less and does way more. And it's like, it just isn't there yet. But I think there is an opportunity there. So cool. Thanks. I just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Well, actually, I got one more thing to add here. You mentioned, the book and the mind node side by side. Like that's kind of interesting. But I actually just got a chance to speak with Marianne Wolf, the author of Reader Come Home,
Okay.
for the Focus podcast. So by the time this one comes out, that one should be available, and I'll put a link to that one in the show notes. But Marianne Wolf is she's done a whole bunch of research on like the science of reading and how digital devices change the way that we read, and makes the case for reading the analog books. So two big things came from reading Reader Came Home. One, David started reading analog books again. But the second thing, and the bigger revelation for the bookworm audience, is that I am now reading fiction.
No. What? Okay. Did you start one? Like, what are you reading right now?
I did. I picked up. So when I read that book, she was talking about the benefits of reading fiction and the empathy that can be grown through that process. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. I'm going to start doing this. And I had no idea where to start for fiction books. I'm not going to just like go to Amazon and look at the top lists. So I went and listened to the Upgradies, and Jason Snell had his list of books from there. And the one that struck me from there was The Mountain in the Sea by Ray Naylor.
Okay.
So I just started that one. I'm like a couple of chapters in, and I guess it's too early to say like I am now a fiction reader, but I am currently reading fiction. We'll see if it sticks.
Nice. So in the community, in the faith-based productivity community, there was the post about somebody said, okay, nonfiction books raise your floor, fiction books raise your ceiling. And I don't know how I feel about that yet. Like I'm still processing through that. But what I'll tell you is that was a comment that's made me think about it multiple times, right? I was like, how do I feel about that? Like it hits that creativity aspect. It hits that imagination aspect. It hits those things that makes me think, somewhat outside of the box, and then my nonfiction books bring my base level up to, cognitive knowledge and connections and things. So I like that idea. I just have to think about it a little bit more. But okay, I'm glad to see you're reading fiction now. Congratulations.
Yeah, still primarily reading nonfiction, but fiction is fun. Turns out.
Turns out. Now, maybe one of my action items, even though it has nothing to do with this book, should be try to read a book on paper.
Absolutely, it should.
And see how it's different in this experiment.
Absolutely. All right, let's do action items here. So I've got 3. I'll go through mine quickly. So the add side quests to my day. This has been successful, but the making it a formal process has been unsuccessful. I'm not documenting this in any way, but I'm giving myself permission to just noodle on things. And if something opens up a loop, like it's okay to disengage from this thing that I was going to do for a little bit to go do this other thing. Those are the side quests. And I can still, because I time block my day, I can still come back and do the big stuff that really needs to get done. One of these things was the whiteboarding session that I shared with you. I'll mention more about that in a little bit. So there's an open loop for y'all. The other thing I had from this was to update my Wheel of Life with the new categories from Ali's Feel Good Productivity book. And that was on page 247. I did this. Let me pull up what I did when I did this was I brought that stuff obviously into my personal retreat template inside of Obsidian. Basically, I didn't use his categories exactly. I modified them a little bit, but I do now have 9 different categories. Okay, so here's what I landed on. Spirit, mind, and body. Those are the first 3, and that's kind of a group. And then friends, family, and significant other. That's another group. And then career/work, mission, and money were the last group. And then I modified the template, so I've got those 9 different areas and give those areas a score. I've got the Wheel of Life graphic inside of the template using the polar area chart. I will mention I've got a whole YouTube video on how I do my personal retreat process in Obsidian. If people are interested in the specifics of that, go check that out because we could spend a lot of time talking about that, and that's not the point of today's episode. The last thing that I did was I updated my eulogy. I had actually done this previously. So I went back, I looked at it, I changed a couple of things. Want me to read it to you?
I do. Can I ask a question before we get to the eulogy?
Yeah.
Or I guess it's a statement. I like the fact that you separated career work from money. Because I think that's an important one to separate, because not everything we do for career and work is directly tied to the fact that we're going to receive some significant financial gain or that it even is part of our money. I like the fact that you separated those two in your Wheel of Life. So that's interesting. And then, let's hear the eulogy.
All right. So this is going to be weird. Mike Schmidt's reading his own eulogy, but
do you want me to read it? Do you want to send it to me and I'll read it to you?
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I'll do it. Mike Schmitz was a loving husband to his wife, Rachel, and an ever-present father to Toby, Joshua, Jonathan, Malachi, and Adelaide. His family was his first ministry, and he always made sure they were his top priority. He frequently said no to work and business opportunities to spend quality time and go on adventures with the people that he valued the most. Mike was also a committed member of his church, and when he wasn't spending time with his family, he could often be found serving there. He believed that God had blessed him richly, and he gave generously of his time and treasure to those who had need. He invested heavily in others and did his best to help them reach their full potential. Mike's life was driven by a desire to be a good steward of what was entrusted to him by God. He desired to inspire, encourage, and teach others to connect to their calling, discover their destiny, and live the life they were created for. Everything he did was filtered through his life theme, and he helped others to accept responsibility, gain clarity, and take action in living a purpose-driven and meaningful life. He helped countless people find their why, multiply their time and talent, and leave a bigger dent in the universe. He was an entrepreneur who loved building businesses and making art. Before he died, he wrote several New York Times best-selling books and gave away over $10 million. Nice. Obviously, this is aspirational. He taught his kids to be lifelong learners and to discover their own creativity. They have all followed in his footsteps as creative entrepreneurs who live life on their own terms.
That's awesome. Like, I want to dissect it, but we don't have time. Like, we're not allowed to take the time to dissect it, but I want to dissect it. It's also intriguing to me how close it ties into a topic we're going to talk about today in terms of the life view.
Yep.
Like that's awesome. So that was a big help for you as you thought about this book. I'm sure it was.
Yeah. I like that action item a lot. You had one action item. How'd you do?
I did. So my action item was to practice the 10-10-10. So 10-10-10 from Ali Abdaal's book was, is this going to matter in the next 10 minutes? Is it going to matter in the next 10, I think, weeks? And is it going to matter in the next 10 years? And I've practiced that once or twice throughout some important decisions that have come up. And what I'll tell you is that it's a good frame. So I liked the frame that it gave me because there were certain things where I legitimately said, nope, for me, this is not going to matter in the next 10 weeks. And it's not even going to matter, it's not going to matter in the next 10 years. It's not even going to matter in the next 10 weeks. But for the next 10 minutes, I should care about this. And it on some level, there was one particular thing that was annoying and kind of frustrating that it helped me release. And it said, okay, this will matter for the next 10 minutes. It might matter for the next 10 days. And then it's gone. Like people are going to forget about it because they're going to move on. And I'm going to forget about it because I'm going to move on. And it allowed me to not stew on that kind of negative thing and process it. I'm trying to use it a little bit more as I think about some future projects and some future work and kind of how those things work. Will it matter in the next 10 minutes, 10 weeks, or minutes, days, weeks, years, however you want to couch the 10. I don't really care about that. So can I give you an example of one that I'm thinking through it with right now?
Yeah.
So not a little bit of a humble brag, but not intentionally. I just need to give you the context. So I got a grant, which is unique for CCU. So we're a teaching focused institution. So faculty members don't get a lot of individual grants. Well, I got a grant, and the grant is to study how STEM practitioners think about their worship and whether they connect the two, right? So if I'm an engineer, a computer scientist, a technologist, is that a form of worship? And what I'm trying to think about as I work through that project is, will this matter in the next 10 minutes? Will this matter in the next 10 years? Will this matter in the next 10 days, months, whatever it might be? And how do I make that study something, and how do I make the deliverables out of that study something that will matter in the next 10 years, that will matter in the next 100 years, and it actually has a significant impact on the field or has a significant impact on people's lives. And I've never thought about it that way before. Like most of the time, the way I've always thought about doing research before, like before I came to CCU, was, okay, like good grant funding, and can I get a publication out of this? And then does it add to the field, right? Like those were the three, but it was never deep enough to where it actually really had any like teeth to it, if you will. And this, I think, gives me a good frame for, no, I want this to mean something. Like if I'm going to take a bunch of my time and work on this, I want this to actually mean something. So it's been valuable in the couple instances that I've used it so far.
Very cool. Can't wait to see what comes out of that grant.
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. It's a crazy amount of work, but I'm excited about it too.
All right. Ready to talk about today's book?
I am. I'm excited about today's book.
All right. So today's book was mentioned in the previous one, and then you had some experience with at least elements of this book. But the book is Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett and Dave Evans. Bill Burnett, if I'm remembering correctly, was the guy who designed the Apple mouse back in the day. So they're both designers, and they teach a Stanford class on this concept about applying design principles to your life, and life planning, I guess, would be the category here. The subtitle is How to Build a Well-Lived, Joyful Life. And so this is kind of my jam, right in my wheelhouse. And when I've discovered that Bill Burnett was an ex-Apple designer, I mean, now you're checking all the boxes.
Yeah, exactly. I want to drive home one point. So design principles, their specific bread and butter is design thinking, right? Which design thinking is a whole process of its own. If you don't know anything about design thinking, I mean, you can read a lot on design thinking. It has a lot to do with human-centered design, and Stanford, the D school at Stanford, has basically brought this field into not only fruition, but like they've made it a very important field in the world of design in general.
Yes, that's a good point. So this is kind of a oddball when you're thinking about design, the application of this to lifestyle design, but that's probably the most interesting application of it for me. Not too long ago, Joe and I read Build by Tony Fadell, and that was interesting too. about designing products specifically. But this is kind of a condensation of the course that they teach. There's a workbook that goes with it that I bought, but I did not go through everything in that workbook. The book itself has an introduction, 11 chapters, and a conclusion. There are no parts. There's lots of visuals, so it's a pretty easy, fast read, unless you are going to go through and do all of the exercises that they tell you to do, because there's a lot of reflection that needs to happen in order for that stuff to be successful. So I didn't do that. I will admit that right now.
I didn't either. And I agree with you completely. Like, the read was very, very easy. It was written on a very tangible level, easy to grasp. But I mean, if you actually go and do these things, you can tell that they do this over a, multiple week period, in either a trimester or a semester or something along those lines. And then they took that idea and they put it into a book. A couple notes I want to bring out here as we intro the book. It was the latest copyright of this book is 2016. There's actually another edition, a refined edition of this called Design Your New Work Life. And I actually think the title of Design Your New Work Life, which is from 2021, makes a lot of sense. And I understand why they did that. So I'm glad we read Design Your Life, because it's the one that launched this whole movement, and it launched this whole way of thinking about life design and applying design thinking to your life. And that's the one I wanted to start with. So I'm glad we started with this one. But I think, and I would suspect, that if we looked at Design Your New Work Life, we'd understand why they made the changes that they did. And we'll talk about that more as we roll through.
Cool. That kind of opens up another point I want to ask you about. I recently listened to Cal Newport's got a great podcast called The Deep Life. And he interviewed Ali Abdaal, and I had no idea that Ali Abdaal and Cal Newport were buddies. They seem, just based on the surface with Feel Good Productivity. And again, we talked through that whole book, and there's a lot of meat there. But on the surface, anyways, it kind of seems contradictory to Cal's railing against the passion mindset. So it was kind of weird to hear them both on the same podcast. But one of the things that they kind of talked about was how influential Tim Ferriss has been with the 4-Hour Workweek in terms of lifestyle design. And I remember reading that book and not really liking it. But one of the points that Cal made was, a lot of the criticism of Tim Ferriss has been unfair because people are attaching to the specifics and they're missing the forest through the trees. Really what he was talking about was this concept of lifestyle design before anybody else. How do you feel about that? Do you agree?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm informed enough to know. I mean, that would make sense to me. Like, so he's thinking about how do I want to live? What life do I want to have? Well, I want to have a life that's bounded. And I guess the best way I can show that I guess I do agree with this implicitly, is the fact that we homeschool, right? And I know you homeschool as well. We homeschool. A large reason why is because it drops a lot of that fluff time out of the school day, and the students can be more focused. So our kids can be more focused on that. And when they're not doing school, they can be doing other creative and productive learning activities, but they're just not quote unquote school activities. They're other things. And I think that's an intentional life design we have as parents towards their education. It isn't as much, or it's not primarily the driver of we hate public school and all that. It's more a matter of what would this look like if it was the ideal schooling situation. And I think Tim would be a similar way to think about that. Is like, well, what would my ideal day be? Like, what would my ideal work life be? Well, my ideal work life would be 4 hours a week. Like that way I can do other things and still learn and still be productive in other ways.
Yeah, I guess I just never really realized how much alignment my perspective and thought processes are with the core of Tim Ferriss's message, because the way that it was packaged, I remember it really kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Even the title, the 4-Hour Workweek, he talked a lot about delegating and, how he initially made his money was through like pharmaceuticals, and just like that. This is not, it's fingernails on the chalkboard of my soul.
Yeah.
But
and I don't remember that one enough. Was it was it very marketing heavy? Like, was it in terms of that title was meant to be, you know, an attention grabber, and then the concepts were different? I don't remember the details of that book.
To be honest, if I were trying to recall at this point, I'd probably do it injustice, and it's
Okay.
going to be biased based on my my feelings towards it. So I do remember he started the book by talking about how when he gets introduced to people at parties, he tells them he's a drug dealer. So like that's just kind of Tim Ferriss's
Yeah,
personality, I guess. And his personality kind of rubs me the wrong way. But
I got it.
hearing Cal and Ali talk about it, it's like, well, maybe actually, I agree with a lot of what he said there, though. And that was kind of shocking to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I bring that up because you talked about how this book being written in 2016, kind of the beginning of this lifestyle design. I feel like it can be traced back a little bit further than that, and probably Tim Ferriss has an element of that. But I know you weren't saying that these guys invented it necessarily, but that's kind of where I think it became popular, or at least gained some credibility. It was, oh, look, Stanford's teaching a class on this now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really, I mean, I see this all the time. It really drives out of a need where, you know, they throw statistics out in the very introduction of this book. And I mean, if you interact with young folks in terms of they're trying to figure out what to do with their life, I mean, it is crazy to figure out, like, what are you interested in? I don't know. Well, what do
Mm-hmm.
you like? I don't know. What don't you like? Things. And it's like, I mean, you get these like insanely vague answers. So it makes total sense where these ideas came from. And I'm sure people have been wrestling around with this stuff for a very, very, very long time. Just
Yeah.
not formalizing it.
Yeah, you mentioned the introduction, so let's just talk about some of those statistics. One of them is that only 27% of U.S. college grads end up in careers related to their majors. So why are we spending all that money to get the majors? I don't know. Let's not go there.
We could go there and we could go there all day long, but we shouldn't right now. So let's move forward.
In
Disclaimer,
America,
disclaimer, I teach at a university.
yeah, I know you do. In America, 2/3 of workers are unhappy with their jobs, and then 15% actually hate their work. And I feel like I've heard these statistics before, but they obviously drive home the point at the beginning that this kind of, I would call it the default life, where you just do what people are telling you should do, that isn't going to end up where you think it's going to end up. You need to be more intentional. In fact, in the City University Court, I'm talking about the PKM stack, and there's the intentional life where you just consume the information, and then that determines the quantity and the quality of the ideas that you have, and ultimately even the actions and tasks and projects that you do. And then I talk about the intentional life is you start with the philosophy at the top, and that works its way down, and it acts as a filter, and it even allows you to curate, what is the information that's going to be useful for me. I mean, that's kind of what we've been doing with Bookworm since the very beginning. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
let's just read more of these books, and then you get done with a book, and then you're like, okay, so what open loops opened up, and what questions do I have about something else? And then you go find something else that maybe is going to answer that question. And really, they're saying like that's the approach you want to take to designing your life. And they kind of reframe. I like this, where you reframe what do you want to do when you grow up. That then becomes who or what do you want to grow into. I've got this saying. I used to add it at the end of all my videos. Keep going and keep growing.
Yep.
So you just basically don't want to stop, and you want to constantly be trying to better yourself, because when you better yourself, you're going to better your situation. Kind of tied back to Cal Newport's "So good they can't ignore you." You just develop your skills to the point where eventually the marketplace recognizes the value that you can bring, and you can make more money, and you can do the things that you want to do. But it's not just you got to find the right situation and someone's got to open a door for you. Let's take ownership over this, and let's design this life that we want to live ourselves.
Yeah. This whole section made me think about how different periods of time and different eras have changed. So if you think way back, you were born into what you were going to do. So I'm born into a lifestyle. This is what we do, right? In our lifestyle, this is what we do. Then you get into a situation where, okay, maybe you're born into a family, and this is what our family does. So what do? I do exactly what the family does, because that's how we transition through. Then we get into a time period where it's like, well, I do what's in the region around me. So if I live in, Appalachia, and like we're coal miners, what do? We all coal mine, right? Because that's the industry that's in our area. And how this progression has come, and we're now at the point where we're not like just going out and looking for the thing we want to do. We're actually in an idea where we can actually figure out and design what we want to do. So we can go purely from creativity to actually doing a thing. And I think that transition, the book made me think back on that transition about how, I mean, honestly, how good we have it right now. Like, I'm not born into the fact that I'm going to shovel hay for the rest of my life or bale hay for the rest of my life. And that's pretty awesome to me. Like, I like that idea, and I like where they take us and where they kick us off from.
Yeah. So should we jump into chapter 1 or anything else you want to talk about from the introduction?
So the only thing I want to bring in the introduction is they start this early, and in my I did a mind map again, so you'll be proud of me.
Nice.
Right, but I did a mind node mind map again, and one of the things that I thought was fun about the mind map, and I probably wouldn't have done this if I hadn't done the mind map, was they introduced these dysfunctional beliefs. And then, as Mike said a little bit ago, they reframe them. So they say dysfunctional belief, reframe, dysfunctional belief, reframe. And they do this throughout the book. And the reason why I say the mind map was effective is because you could pull a section of the mind map out that was just these dysfunctional beliefs and reframes, and just these dysfunctional beliefs and reframes. I mean, there's probably 15 of them. There's probably 15 of these dysfunctional beliefs and then reframes. And I think that was a really interesting way to drive home some of the main points that they wanted to make. And I thought it was a very effective way to drive home some of the main points that they wanted to take. That's really the only other thing I have for, I guess the one other thing, I just thought about it now. They have 5 designer mindsets. Mm-hmm. So the designer mindsets they introduce here are curiosity, bias to action, reframing, awareness, and then radical collaboration. And then the chapters in the book address those things. So they give more practical ideas on curiosity. They give more practical ideas on bias to action, more practical things on reframing. So again, I think they do a fairly good job setting us up to where they're going to go in the book moving forward.
Yeah, and those mindsets that they talk about, those are like natural. But there's the outline for your sections, but they they didn't do that.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly.
All right, so chapter 1 is to start where you are, and I really like this, the whole concept of starting where you are. You can't just say, well, I want to be in a different situation. You have to prioritize progress, not perfection here. And they talk about problem finding and problem solving. That's ultimately what leads to a well-designed life. And then they talk about this concept of gravity problems. So the problems that you choose to focus on are important. Gravity problems are really big. Like gravity is a problem, but you're not going to be able to solve that one. So gravity problems are problems that can't be solved. Gravity is always going to be there no matter how much you wish it wasn't. So focus on the things where you can actually move the needle. And I think that's interesting. But then the rest of this, where they talk about the life design assessment, and they've got the 4 different gauges of health, love, play, and work. That part I actually didn't like a whole lot.
I agree.
Yeah, I just got done with my action item on the wheel of life, and like there's 9 of them there. But I like the idea that's attached to these, because they say basically you should take action on a gauge that's low. And I have an example of this that I'm willing to share from a wheel of life exercise from actually before COVID, where one of my lowest scores was social, because I am actually, I'm a podcaster and a creator, and I'm always talking to a camera, but I'm not very extroverted in real life. My idea of a good time is sitting at home on a Friday night next to the fireplace, reading a book. And my wife is the exact opposite. She gets energy from being around people. So one of the things that we decided to do was kind of in conjunction with my low social wheel of life, because I realized that people are important, even though that's not how my personality is naturally to go spend time with a bunch of people. Had just read The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, and we decided that we were going to start hosting these small group kibbutzes is what we call them, based off of what Nir Eyal talked about, where they'd have a couple families come over and the kids would go in the basement, and they would seed kind of intentional discussion points with the adults. They'd share a meal, then they go and to the living room and they'd talk about things. So that's kind of what we decided to do, and we set that up. We bought new furniture for our living room so we could kind of facilitate these conversations. And it was really successful, at least until COVID hit and we had to stop doing them. But it was all spurred by recognizing that this area, day to day, doesn't really bother me. Day to day, I just want to go chill. But in the long run recognize that I do need to be sowing into these relationships and establishing these friendships with other people. That's important long term. So creating a systemic way to actually move the needle on that gauge.
Yeah, Mike, I agree with you completely. Like, I like the idea of the dashboard because I think it's a good way to see where you are in the areas. What I didn't like was just the four, because I thought there's an opportunity for you to do more there, and there's an opportunity for you to do ones that are more relevant to your life, right? So mine, I'll be very quick about this because there's a bigger point I want to make in this chapter. But like mine is just general health. So if I'm not moving, and I don't even mean like hardcore exercising, if I'm not moving like outside doing something, or if I'm not eating well, man, it impacts a lot of the rest of my life, right? So if I can nail that area on the dashboard, it seems like other things tend to go well as well. Or it's actually really a reverse gauge. When things aren't going well in other places, I notice it in those areas, right? Like I stop moving as much, I stop being outside as much, and I stop eating, in an appropriate way. But the point I wanted to get at on this chapter is, man, the gravity problems I thought was such an interesting concept and such an interesting idea. And this is an indication of where I think this book really adds value to me is there are these core ideas that they pitch out here and these core concepts that they pitch out here that I think are so valuable. Gravity problems, I think, is one of them. So what I loved here is they say in the book, the only response to a gravity problem is acceptance. So like, think about gravity. Like the only thing we can do in the world with gravity is accept it and design around it. Like we can't get rid of it. We can't make it go away. It's a law. It's a fundamental thing. It's always going to be there. And I've started to think about like, okay, in my personal life, in my professional life, in all of these areas of my life, what are the gravity problems? What are the things that like they're going to be there and I need to accept that, right? One of them being my kids are going to make noise, right? Why? Because they're kids and they're young and like they're just going to be loud, and that's a gravity problem. So what does that mean? I have to design around the fact that they're making noise. I can't really try to tell them stop making noise. It's part of their nature. They have to make noise. So I have to design around that. And I think that idea really changed the way I think about a lot of things. So I liked that idea a lot.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're right. I do think that that's a great example of a gravity problem. But it's not an obvious gravity problem. I don't think I fall into this category, but I could see an alternate scenario where mom or dad is just saying, like, kids, you got to knock it off and be quiet. And the fact that they're not, like, they believe they have the potential to be quiet, and it's just like they're choosing not to. You've basically taken the other approach, is like, well, this is just, kids are crazy. So I can't really change that, but I could see another alternate universe where someone is trying to, and they're just getting frustrated, because you can probably influence it a little bit, but not a ton. And so I
Yes.
think the takeaway is still the same principle: focus on the things where you can actually make a difference.
Yep. Agreed completely.
All right, building a compass is chapter 2, and I like this concept a lot. This kind of ties into something that we did not tease out from the introduction, but they talk about how a well-designed life is one where who you are, what you believe, and what you do all align. And that's really important. They talk about the two things that you need for your compass are a work view and a life view. Don't like that. Right there. There's the work-life balance myth in action.
Embedded there, yes.
Yes, but I think I understand why they do that, because most people are going to think in those two buckets. So I think they would probably say, because they're saying these things have to align. That's the purpose of the compass. You're bringing these things together. But I think it's more helpful personally to just destroy that limiting belief that there are these lines between work and life, especially now where there are so many people working from home. Those lines are blurred. So you have to establish your own boundaries. And the sooner that you understand that and take responsibility for that, you can exercise more influence in that, the more you're going to be able to actually create an atmosphere and an environment where you can actually do what you need to do. But the larger point here, and the one that I really want to kind of talk about, is the true north idea of where you're going. And this I think is genius. I love the idea of the compass. I actually have in one of my creativity talks, I talked about how you don't need a plan, you need a direction. And the visuals I use are the compass versus the blueprint. If you're trying to build something, design something, and you try to get all of the pieces identified and all of the tasks broken down and create that plan, and this is when it's going to get done. Humans are bad at that, and it's going to take twice as long and it's going to cost twice as much, and you're going to be frustrated the entire time. So don't focus on all of the things that you need to do. There's only two things you need to do, what you're doing right now and then everything else.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so the compass can indicate this is the next step. And when you get done with the one thing, then you can focus on what is the next thing instead of scanning the entire horizon. Okay, I'm going to pick something now out of all of these available options. That's the value of the compass. It tells you which way the next step is supposed to go. And I think that's a much better approach.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't feel as strongly about the life view work view thing. I see what you're saying now, right? That it it separates those two, bifurcates those two in a way that doesn't make sense. Did you connect with the life view in terms of the life theme stuff that you do? Like, was that a connection you had there, or did you see those two things as being a little bit different?
Kind of. I mean, that's on the surface, anyways. With the label, it makes a lot of sense. I think probably from a philosophical point of view, there's alignment there, but how they go about it is very different than what I
Yeah,
do,
yeah,
because they're just kind of like, here's some blanks and fill in this stuff. And like I literally just got done with the cohort where we walk people through this process, which is what I used. And I find that framework more helpful in ending up at something that is actually useful. And I get it. This is a book. This is not the class. So
hmm
you sign up for the class or you go through one of the workshops, because they actually have workshops where they'll walk people through this stuff. I have absolute confidence that the person who is facilitating that workshop is helping you along this path more than they're able to do in the 200 pages or so
yes,
in this book. However, just given the content of the book, like that is missing.
yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I think the one of the takeaways for me out of this chapter was the idea of coherency and like the fact that if these two things aren't aligned, if these two things aren't connected to each other, then you're going to notice a dissonance in your life and you're going to feel this friction or feel something. I actually think it's very challenging to align these and align them in a way that makes sense long term. But I think that's part of their process as well, as they're saying you'll never have it perfect. You're going to continue to have to work on this life view, work view, whatever other views you have, and bring those things together in coherency. So overall, wasn't you know I thought this set a good foundation in terms of setting the stage for where we're going next.
Yeah, agreed. And in fact, the next chapter is chapter 3, wayfinding. And the wayfinding title fits perfectly with what they're talking about with building a compass. Wayfinding is the ancient art of figuring out where you are going when you don't actually know your destination.
Yep.
There's two tools for wayfinding that they talk about: engagement and energy. Engagement is feeling excited, focused, or having a good time. I don't know if I like that definition, the having a good time piece at the end. But again, that probably is just my like off the cuff reaction. Same kind of, it's rooted in the same reaction in the issue that I can't quite put my finger on when I pick up Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal. Like just on the surface, I feel like I don't want to touch this because it's not always going to be fun. It's kind of, I guess I'm so connected to what Cal talks about with like the passion mindset and how dangerous that is, that if there's even like a chance that that's going to be misinterpreted by somebody, I feel like this is dangerous. Stay away.
Yeah. Yeah.
But overall, I think it's fine. You do want to be engaged with things, but they're not going to be the things that are always fun. They're going to be the things, honestly, that are meaningful. And if you can connect that to your life theme, is what I would call it, your personal mission statement, and that creates the clarity to cut the things that don't hit the mark, and then motivation to do the things that do. So that's kind of how I interpreted this section on wayfinding. I kind of filled in the blanks here, but ultimately, the engagement and the energy piece, this is something that we don't think a whole lot about, but this is really the thing that is going to allow us to do the things we want to do, or it's going to be holding us back. You can have the time to do something. You can have the thing on your calendar, but if you don't have the energy, or you just are like, what's the point? You're not going to show
Yep.
up and do it unless you maybe got some external accountability, something like that. But it's the gray matter, our brain. And they actually talk about that. Our brain accounts for 2% of our body mass, but it takes up 25% of our energy. So that's the thing we got to be protecting. One of the exercises they gave was this good times journal. And I don't think I'm
Yes.
actually going to keep this, but I think this is a cool idea where you record when you're energized or when you're engaged. I think I'll try to add elements of that to my daily journaling in Obsidian, but I'm not creating separate categories for this. I think this is just going to be under my journal entries, but it's going to be something that I'm going to try to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's one of those, you know it when you see it, or you know it when it happens, and you make a note of that as you're going. I thought the direction aspect of this was good. I'm trying to figure out how to summarize this, or how to say this in a way that makes sense. So help me out, Mike, if I mess up. So if you play video games, in certain video games where you're navigating a world, there's like a fuzzy map in the bottom right hand corner, and at times you have your fuzzy map, and it'll tell you like what direction you need to head in. And then you have a goal, but you have no idea what's in between these two places, right? Because the rest of the little cheat map, if you will, is blacked out or grayed out, or you can't see it. And this is what came into my head when I was reading this section. I was like, oh, it's like one of those things where it's like, it's telling me which direction I need to travel to achieve this goal that I want. And I need to do that with my life too, is I need to say, okay, I need to travel in a certain direction. Well, the way they present this is, what direction do I need to travel in? I need to travel in the direction of things that engage me, of things that give me energy. And if I do that and I'm aligned with the overall goal, or the compass is the way they describe it. And this is where I started to go, I don't know if I like compass. Like, I don't know if compass sits with me correctly. Something felt wrong about it. I don't have a good example or a good like alternative to it, but compass doesn't feel right to me. Another aspect that stood out of this chapter to me was, they make a quote that flow is play for grown-ups, right? So this idea of, yeah. Flow, where you're so engaged with that activity that you basically go into a trance and you forget about the world. And next thing you know, 3 hours have passed and you have no idea what's happening. I really like that concept, and using that to identify like, what are the areas where, man, I had no idea I liked this as much as I did. But like, I just lost 3 hours of my day because I was so focused and so engaged in that activity. And then I think it's valuable to think about, because they call this out in the book, where that might be an activity that actually drains your energy. So now we need to talk about whether or not that's an energy giving thing, or that's a energy draining thing. And if it's energy draining, it's not terrible. It's just, you can't have too many of those, or else you get to the end of the day and you're completely wiped, and then they don't say it, but you end up leading to burnout. So I liked the way all of this fit together. I like the good time journal, actually. I'm a little bit more in terms of, I think that would be a good section of the notebook, and just writing stuff down. This is the activity. This is why it engaged me. This is why it gave me energy. So those were the good parts of this chapter. Where the chapter started to get me, and I started to notice this transition, is things start to shift more towards work in this chapter. So yeah. The book's called Design Your Life, but if you look at the dysfunctional belief, work is supposed to be enjoyable, right? If you look at different things that there's another section that I'm blanking on right now. Oh, but work is fun when you're actually learning, leaning into your strengths, and deeply engaged and energized. So here we immediately start to take a shift towards work, which we hadn't done up until now as much, if you will, in the book. And I thought, that's really interesting. And this is why I said their new version of the book, they actually introduced work into the title, and I think that makes a lot of sense.
I did too. I saw that show up in my Amazon recommendations, but I didn't pick that one up yet. Let me go back to the mini map that you were talking about, because they say something specifically in this chapter of follow the energy. And the framing with this is actually very similar to the framing that I use in the Life Theme cohort. One of the first things I ask people to do week 1 is identify your moments of impact, I call them. But basically, what have you done that really made you come alive? And I think that's actually really great advice. And the visual I get for this, and I apologize, I know you mentioned Zelda last time, but not really played it. But that's the perfect analogy for this, because in Zelda, they have these shrines, and you'll be like running through the map, and all of a sudden you'll hear this boop, 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 which means that there's a shrine nearby.
Okay.
Okay. And then the minute that you hear that, you're like, oh, I got to go find the shrine. So then you start moving in the direction of the shrine, and it gets faster, like as you get closer, and then you make a wrong turn and it starts to get slower. You're like, oh, it's kind of like if you're a kid, I hide something in the room. You're getting warmer, getting warmer. Oh, you're getting colder.
Yeah.
That is the same principle. And I feel like energy is the perfect thing to use for that, because you can feel it. You know when you're energized, you know when you're not. And sometimes you just got to have the discipline and do the hard thing and push through. But ultimately, long term, that's not going to be enough. Now, there are ways to create the energy. What you do doesn't even necessarily need to change. It could just be your perspective and understanding and connecting to a reason for doing the things. But I like that follow the energy idea. And that actually gets into the next chapter. Anything else you want to talk about from chapter 3 before we go there?
So I know you're developing this creator career and everything's going pretty well in there and all that stuff. But I just thought of the technology idea that is going to revolutionize you and I. So we need to start a company that's an AI company, and it's like the Humane pin, right? You clip it on there, and as you walk around and engagement and energy is happening, it starts beeping faster and faster, and you're like, I need to follow that engagement. I need to follow. Think about it. We'd be billionaires, Mike. We'd be billionaires.
That might not be good. I could walk into a room and it might stop beeping altogether. People could use that as an indication. Oh man. All right. So chapter 4 is getting unstuck. And the reason that this ties so nicely, I mean, there's a lot that we could talk about in this chapter, but specifically they talk about creating 3 mind maps for engagement, energy, and flow. And this is one of the action items I jotted down from this. I actually want to do this. Now, they talk about mind mapping here a little bit, and they say, start in the middle with one of these: engagement, energy, or flow, then go out a level, then go out another level. They do a really poor job of explaining mind mapping.
Yes,
but that is from the perspective of someone who actually made a course on it for this sweet setup back in the day. So I have more experience with this concept than the average person. I probably got over 1,000 mind maps in MindNode currently. I really believe in the power of visual thinking and mind mapping specifically. I think it's a really powerful tool for getting unstuck. And that kind of ties into the whole design thinking process. There's more ideas, you have more possibilities. And one of the things that they said here, which I thought was pretty brilliant: quantity has a quality all of its own. When you have a bunch of options, then you can start to see which ones really are potentially good ones. And never choose your first solution to any problem. I mean, that's not necessarily an action item, but it's a great life rule.
Yeah, I work with my engineering students all the time on this, right? Because they'll get so fixated on the first thing they think of. And I'm like, no, create more ideas. And they're like, but the one I have is awesome. And I'm like, no, it's an idea. We have no idea if it's awesome yet. That's a whole nother stage of the process. So yes, I agree with you completely.
Yeah, you have no idea how good things are at the beginning. In fact, in the City University cohort, I kind of talk about that with ideas specifically. You don't know what they are when you capture them. You got to give it some time. You got to disconnect from it in the moment, because the minute that you have an idea, you think it's the best thing you ever thought of. And then the next day you're like, oh, this is complete garbage. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, the very best of the things that you captured, those I bring into Obsidian, and then I have a whole separate process for developing those. And I talk about that as like a greenhouse for your ideas, because you plant these seeds and then you let them develop, you provide the right conditions, but you don't know what those seeds are when you plant them. And that resonates with me because I do not have a green thumb. I'm definitely not a master gardener. You show me a seed, I have no idea what it is. Now, other people, maybe that doesn't resonate so much because they understand the whole principle. They're better farmers than I am. But I think that is true with ideas. You can't judge it by its initial impressions. You got to give it some time, and then you start to see what you really got to work with.
Yeah, I like the idea section here because I agree, right? In terms of one of the enemies of creativity is judgment, and the fact that we get these ideas and we start to immediately judge them. And it's like, hold off, just make the ideas first. We'll have a whole section where we judge them later, and I think that's a good philosophy to live by. What I thought was strange here is, so they introduce ideas, and they don't say the word brainstorming here. At least I don't remember them saying the word brainstorming here, but then there's a whole nother section on brainstorming later. And the fact that they separated those, or that they didn't do more on this early, they did it later in the book, I thought was strange. So that was something that caught me, in kind of a strange place. One of the things I loved about this chapter was the anchor problems, and then they distinguish between these gravity problems and the anchor problems. So an anchor problem, right, they say it's a real problem. It's just a really, really hard one. It's actionable, but we've been stuck on it so long, often it seems insurmountable. And I really like this idea and how they separate these two things. Okay, there's these gravity problems where we kind of just have to go like, this is the reality, and what are we going to do about it? And then we go, there's these anchor problems, and wow, we've been stuck on this so long that I don't know if there's any way we could ever solve this problem. But what it does is it helps you reframe it, let's explore new possibilities. Let's challenge the way we've currently been approaching this. And what I started to do, at least informally in my head, is I started to actually categorize things in my life and say, all right, this is gravity. This is anchor. This is gravity. This is anchor. And it was a really good way. This is one of those core concepts I was talking about before. This was a really good way for me to think about kind of how I should see the world, or how I could see the world, not should, I guess, how I could see the world in different ways, and how that helps me, process through things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm not going to clarify the problems into the different categories in any sort of formal way, but I think that is interesting and important to recognize the subtle difference there. I agree. I like the anchor problems a lot. So chapter 5 is Design Your Life. And this is where we get introduced to the concept of the Odyssey plan, which is a plan for the next 5 years of your life. Now, there's 3 different versions of the Odyssey plan that they say you're supposed to make. Or is an Odyssey plan all 3 of these things side by side? I was a little confused by that.
So yes, they would say the Odyssey plan is 3 side by side. And you do life 1, life 2, and life 3. So okay. Life 1 is the thing that you're doing, or the plan that you're currently on. Life 2 is the thing that you would do if 1 was suddenly gone. So for some reason, plan 1 went out the window, what would we do? And then life 3 is basically the world is your oyster. Open it up, whatever you want to do. Resources are unlimited. What would that plan look like? This is the one this is the part of this book that I'm most familiar with, because I run my students through this design challenge. I usually run it through them in their first year here, and I run it through them in their last year here. And I like to let them look at them and say, like, okay, look how different your 5-year plans might be, and then what's happened in those 5-year plans. So I resonated with this section a lot, but because I've done it before, and I've seen the effect it has on students and people, I guess, in general, because I've done it with not just students. But one of the really cool things that you get out of this is how difficult it is for people to think beyond 2 years. It's actually really, really interesting, because the first 2 years, they usually do fine. But then when they start to get like 3 or 4 year 5, they freeze, and they're like, I don't know what I want to do in 4 years. I don't know where I'm going to be in 4 years, or what goals I want to achieve. And I was like, okay, that's what the activity is for you then. Like, that's what you need it to be. So I resonate a lot with this, because I've seen it work very effectively with folks.
So when you do this, do you follow the format that they have in the book, which is there's a visual or graphic timeline, there's a title for each option in the form of a 6-word headline, and then there are questions that this alternative is asking, and the dashboard where you gauge the resources, the likability, the confidence, and the coherence?
Yes. So I follow that, but what I focus on more is the visual graphic and the timeline, and then the questions that come up out of this timeline. I find that the students, and even I, don't really resonate as much with making the 6-word headline. I mean, it's fine, but you don't get as much out of that one. And then the dashboard, I think the dashboard, the way they set it out, where it goes resources, likability, confidence, and coherence, those are an okay starting place. But this is where I think the individual can change that. The one that I think is the most valuable out of that, or I guess the 2 that would be the most valuable, is what resources do I have? Like how because you get into some likelihood on that one, is like, if I have a ton of these resources, okay, that's much more likely. And if I don't have any of the resources, now you start to ask questions of how do I get those resources? but then the confidence side of it too, right? So you tie into the confidence side because a lot of times students can develop these 5-year plans and they're really effective, or they're really like promising, if you will. But man, they have zero confidence that they're ever going to do it. They have zero confidence that would ever, come to fruition. And you go, okay, why? Like, what is the thing? So what these do, these 1, 2, 3, 4, visual, graphic, title, questions, dashboard, they basically help people. And later on in a chapter, they're going to talk about the team that you go through this designing your life process with. They really help other people ask a bunch of really interesting questions and say, oh, I noticed that you rated this resource really, really low. What are you going to do about that? How is that going to, how are you going to overcome that? Or you rated this really, really high. Where do you get that resource from? And how could I get, how could I access some more of that resource or whatever it might be? So yeah, I like this a lot, this section.
Nice. I did not do this, but I feel like I've done elements of what the Odyssey plan is trying to accomplish before. Maybe because you've gone through a bunch of them, you can kind of tell me. In my mind, I'm thinking the average person is going to go through this and they have no trouble thinking about the thing that they're currently doing. The thing you do, if the thing were suddenly gone, now you're starting to open the door to some additional possibilities, some things that you didn't know that were already adjacent. And then the last one is really designed to get you to think bigger. I can probably see how before this, I'm so focused in on just like, I'm following this track. And now I start to look around and I see the other options. And I would guess that most people are going to end up somewhere between the thing they do if they were suddenly gone and the thing that they would do if they had no limitations. And then that goes into the prototyping thing in the next chapter. But
yeah, I can't say that that's where they land. I don't think there is a place where most people land. Some people have that path, that the thing you do path, the first one, so clearly planned out, and they're just on a trajectory, and they know that's what they want to do, and they've got it settled. That they actually have a lot of trouble with the other two, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a very good way. Like, they are the exception to the rule in terms of they've got it figured out. Then there's other ones that need the brainstorming step that comes in step 2, and then they need the freedom to really, really open up in step 3, because that's really what step 3 is doing. Step 3 is saying, you put all these limitations on this when you're doing this. Well, I can't. No, you can. Like, just imagine that you can. There are no limitations. And they need those two to open up the brainstorm. And then where I think the value comes in, and they don't really talk about it in the book, where I think the value really comes in is I say, okay, look at those 3 plans. What's the plan you want to do? Take the elements of all 3 plans and put them in the plan that at this moment, it's a snapshot in time, but at this moment, what's the one you want to do? And what's really fun is you'll get students who will come out and they'll be like, man, I didn't realize how much I like to travel because I put travel in all 3 of these plans. So therefore, in the one, whatever I'm going to do, long term, travel has to be a part of that. Like, I have to either have enough vacation time that I can travel, or I have to have a job that lets me travel a lot. And it's like the smushing of those 3 together and then coming out on the other side is really where I see the value in this process for the way I've used it in practice.
And I'm guessing that the next step is going to be the chapter 6, and that's going to be applicable no matter which path they go down, correct?
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
Cool. So let's go there then. Chapter 6 is prototyping. I know you had mentioned at the beginning this was one of the big ideas, and maybe you can introduce this one. I'll just real briefly. Prototyping is kind of the crappy first version of something. It's the first step, but it's never designed to be the final product. It's sort of like a test when you're starting this, and that's really the important first step to start going down one of these paths, especially if it's one of those ones that you really haven't given yourself permission to consider in previously, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So if we were going to section this book into parts, this is where we switch from curiosity into bias to action. So the point of this is they say, well, as a designer, right? And they even, they write this in the book, building is thinking, right? And I've heard this in different forms from a writing standpoint, that writing is thinking. So don't think that I think first and then I write the stuff, or I think first and then I create. As I'm creating it, I'm actually thinking through and making it better and refining it. Well, that's the same idea. It's this bias to action, and we're going to move towards action. Now, what I'll tell you is, in my experience running these through these frameworks and working through these ideas with folks, this is the hardest part. is them coming to an idea of like, okay, what is a prototype that actually makes sense for the thing I want to explore? And what we always have to back people into is we have to say, what do you want to learn? Okay, as what do you want to learn directly ties into what you explore. So if you want to learn what it might be like to move from, I don't know, finance to healthcare, right? Like, so, okay, let's think about what's a prototype look like that's going to help you understand the difference between the work context of finance and the work context of healthcare. So it's like, this actually gets really, really hard. And this is where having somebody who's done this a few times before, or at least can give you really good and honest feedback, will help. So they talk about different ways to prototype, and they really only throw out two here. They throw out prototype conversations and prototype experiences. So prototype conversations are basically interviews. You're doing interviews to glean as much wisdom as you can from other people about what they do and why they do it and how they do it and the context that they're doing it in. This is one of my action items, right? So we'll get to it to the end, but I want to do more prototype conversations around the intersection of faith and technology, and what does that look like, and where are people working in it right now, and where's the field growing, and how is it growing? But then these prototype experiences, they call out, the one person in the book does like 3 internships, right? And he figures out a way to smush those 3 internships together. Well, that would be a prototype experience. So let's say I wanted to be a content creator, right? Instead of me launching something like a podcast and doing all the background work to get it all set up and get all the feeds set up, I would try to find somebody, like try to network, which we'll get to later. I'll try to network my way into this and say, hey, Mike, could I come on your show once and just figure out what it's like to be a podcaster? Or I would say, hey, Mike, you make podcasts all the time. Could we sit down and make a fake podcast together so I can get the experience of what it would be like to make one? And these two things allow us to really learn, but they lower the stakes significantly. We don't we don't cause an upheaval in our life. We don't go off the deep end with it, but we really get some good tangible feedback. But I would say this is one of the hardest pieces of this process, is because making good prototypes is challenging. And I think the best advice they give here is, I'm trying to figure out where they give it, but they talk about dropping the prototype down to learn one thing from the prototype. Mm-hmm. So whatever you're going to try to do, just try to learn one thing. Don't try to learn 10 things. That makes it too hard. Figure out what the minimum viable prototype is, if you will. So if y'all know the startup world, MVP, like the minimum viable prototype to learn that one thing.
Yeah. So real quickly on the podcast topic that you mentioned, I feel like there's an important distinction here. And this is kind of based on their life design interview thing. If you go into it, and I'm not saying that you did this, but let's say I've got this podcast, right? If you were to approach me and be like, hey, can I be a guest on your show? And I don't know who you are. We've never had any interaction before. I'm like, no, because I'm going to protect my podcast. It's my baby.
Yes. Yes.
Now, you and I had previous conversations on your podcast. So I knew, at least for the first one, when I was like, hey, let's do a guest episode, see how it goes, that episode was going to turn out well. So the life design interview that they talk about here is a conversation with someone who is either doing and living what you're contemplating or has real experience and expertise in an area about which you have questions. They also talk about how people enjoy being helpful, but the way to unlock people being helpful is to make it low risk for them. So just putting myself in that situation, if someone were to really want to know how to start a podcast, I will give them a bunch of time. I'll point them in the right direction. I'll create these resources, like this is the mic that you got to get. This is this is how you want to do the editing. This is how you connect all the pipes. This is how you publish the episodes. This is who I would work with in order to get a logo, like shortcutting all that stuff for people. Happy to do that. The minute that you're like, hey, let me onto your platform, my shields go up.
Well, okay. So, but they would say there's a distinction here, right? Because in the first side of that, where you're giving me all that information, that's not a prototype. Okay. The prototype has to be, you tell me, so the conversational one is you tell me everything you can tell me about actually making one.
Yep.
Like, tell me about the entire process, what it's like to talk to people. How do you feel when you do it? All those things.
But then the thing I want to call it here is, like, when it's time to build the prototype, you better do that on your own. Don't ask somebody else who is a mentor in some sense to put their name on the line when they don't know if you're actually going to follow through with this thing.
This is where I think the second example, the one that I came to afterwards, actually fits a lot better. Is you would ask that mentor, like, could we record a fake one?
Yes,
could I glean your
exactly.
experience through that fake one? And that is a lot better because it doesn't put the mentor at risk, or it doesn't put the guard up of the mentor. So yeah, that's a much better example. I agree. Okay, so did you have anything else? Because I want to move us to the brainstorming idea here, because this is where it comes back.
Go for it.
Yeah, so it actually, I didn't think about this before. I actually just thought about this right now based on something I said, where I said this is the hardest section. It actually now makes sense to me why they may have brought brainstorming into here, is because most people, in my experience, struggle at this stage. So where do they need help brainstorming? In the prototype phase. They really need help brainstorming what these prototypes might be and letting the wild ideas fly, which the authors are really, really big on these wild ideas. I like the fact that they throw out two different methods for brainstorming. So they give you just the definition of the one, which I don't think does it justice, but group brainstorming, and they give you a little blurb about what group brainstorming is. Then they give you their life design brainstorming, which is frame a good question, warm up, brainstorm, and then name and frame the outcomes. And I think if you want to do brainstorming well, that's a pretty good minimum set of criteria to help people get to a decent amount of ideas. And then when you get into those name and frame outcomes, that actually helps you make them actionable. And one of the things I really liked out of this was the sentence that they put. We had 141 ideas. We grouped those into 6 categories. And based on our focal question, we selected 8 killer ideas to prototype. Then we prioritized the list. And our first prototype is boom, because it literally hits everything. Like, it summarizes what we did. It summarizes why we did it. It summarizes where we're going to go next. And then it summarizes after that one, where we're going to go after that. And I think that is a huge, valuable sentence that they threw in the book.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I like the process there where we're constantly whittling things down until this is the thing that we're going to test. And then if that doesn't work, we'll build another prototype. I agree that part's really, really good. All right. Chapter 7.
Oh, Mike. This is where I stopped liking the book. I'm not going to say it wasn't valuable, but this is where I stopped liking the book.
Yeah. So this is interesting. Chapter 7 is how not to get a job. And the reason I say this is interesting is that I agree with a lot of the principles of what they're saying here, but I feel like there's a whole lot more that is missing. So they talk about the anatomy of the standard job description and how section 1 is the setup, which are the generic job qualifications. Section 2 is the skills, always based on the skills of the previous job holder. And then section 3 is what makes a candidate special, where the truth sneaks into the job description. And having been in charge of revamping the hiring process at the previous gig, I can tell you that this is pretty much spot on.
That's funny.
However, I don't know, they have tips for internet job searches and stuff like that. And I agree that the standard way to go find a job is not probably the way that you want to do it. However, I don't think that this is completely on the person who is creating the job description or the person that is reading the job description. Now, obviously, you want to take ownership of this if you're from the perspective of I'm trying to find a job. There are things that you can do. But ultimately, I think if you're trying to get a job, you want it to be a good fit, and you've got to go into these interviews with the perspective of I'm interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing me. And then the quality of the interview is based on a whole lot more factors than what you have covered in this book so far.
Yeah.
I mean, when I redid the process, we integrated emotional intelligence assessments. We integrated this top grading piece from Brad Smart, where you're asking the question, can I interview a previous boss or manager to verify what you're telling me is true? And you don't actually have to follow through with that. That's what the threat of a reference check, just the fact that they check, yes, this is part of our standard process. Now they're going to tell you the truth when you actually get to the interview. The whole process is just stupid. It's we're trying to trick people into getting the job, getting the offer. And once you get the offer and you get plugged into the company, they're looking for somebody who's a right fit, but there's no way you're gonna be able to tell if it's a right fit till you're actually in the culture. The whole thing is messed up.
These 2 chapters just felt so out of place to me. like it's not that they're not saying good and interesting things. Like I'll actually probably use a decent amount of this as I advise students and as I counsel students, right? But it just felt so out of place because I was like, wait, how did we go from prototyping to now we're just going to start talking like very, very laser focused on the problems with the job process, the fact that there are these hidden jobs, and then like getting into this dream job and networking. And I was just like, wait, like what just happened? And then this ties back to the thing I said before. It makes sense now why they've repositioned this book as your work life, because in a book that's titled Your Work Life, this makes a lot more sense, right? Like, I mean, I can understand. I still don't think it should be in 7 and 8, so I'd want to see if it's moved, but I think it just doesn't fit in this section for me.
I agree with you. Now, you kind of mentioned chapter 8. Let's actually just do that real quickly because there's not a whole lot else I want to say from chapter 7. And chapter 8 is a separate chapter, and that's designing your dream job. I think there's one thing worth understanding in this chapter from the perspective of somebody who is going to be looking for a job. You don't want to get a job offer. They told a story in here about someone who had all these crazy qualifications and they were trying to get a job offer and they sent out all these different resumes and they got nothing. And they're basically saying you shouldn't be trying to get someone to give you a job offer. You should be having a whole bunch more conversations. You should be networking in a way, not just like, what can I get from people, but being curious and developing these relationships. And then what that will lead to in the long term is a whole bunch of offers, a whole bunch of options. And then from there, you can pick the one that resonates with you the best or you think is the best fit. And I think that's actually pretty good advice.
Yeah.
Now, kind of buried in that is the whole idea of like effective networking. They told one story about this guy who moved to this town and just started talking to all these people. And then he goes into the interview for the board and they're like, how do you know that you're going to be able to develop the relationships? You're new here, basically. How do we know that you're going to be able to develop the relationships you need to be successful? And he's like, well, I've already done it with 3 of you because 3 of the 5 people he had connected with. Like that's this in action, the best version. It's not always going to play out that way, but yeah, just be curious, be nice, don't be a jerk, and talk to people.
Yeah, I think the big thing that stood out in chapter 8 for me were networking, like you said. So I'll double down on the idea that helping folks understand that networking isn't slimy, that like everybody needs to know other people, and you can do it in a, you know, they say the word slimy, that's why I said it, but it's like you can do it in a way that's off-putting to everyone. But at the same time, everybody knows that building a network is a valuable thing, and like when you've seen the benefit of a good network, man, it is very, very encouraging. It's like, oh, I need to talk to somebody, like, oh, that person might know them. And then next thing you know, 2 steps later, you're talking to the person and you're like, wow, that was incredible. Like I had no idea that was going to happen. You can use it in a bad way. Like you can use it just to take advantage of people. So don't be that person. But I thought their ideas there around like using it to learn and using it to edify both situations is fantastic. The other one that got me that I liked a lot about this section was the hidden job market. And I think this is more true than we all realize or than people realize. So you think Indeed, LinkedIn, whatever these are, that this is the job market or the corporate website or whatever it is. And it's amazing to me the number of times that people find their way into an interview or an offer based on just random conversations they had during the week, or somebody knew somebody who thought you were an interesting person or your background was interesting and they wanted to tell this other person about it. Like, I think that is a really, really interesting idea. And then they do another quote here that I really, really love. Right. And it demonstrates how to do this. The more I learn about XYZ environmental, like they're saying a company there, the more I learn about your company and the more people I meet here, the more fascinated it becomes. I wonder what would be the steps involved in exploring this more or moving forward with this. And that's such a natural way to like, you connect with them because you've just had a bunch of conversations with them. And they dispel the idea of like, you have this interview and you say, well, what jobs do you have open right now? And it's easy for the person to just be like, none. Have a good day, right? Like, you know, and like it ends the conversation where when you say, is there any way for me to get more involved in what you're doing? Is there any way for me to get more involved in the organization? It plants that seed of like, well, maybe there is, right? Like we've been talking about this position, or, you know, we had so-and-so just quit. And I wonder if, and I really liked that aspect of this. again, but it's weird because it feels odd where they
Yeah.
put it in the book, but I think it's very valuable.
So I have a short story that you'll appreciate. My brother-in-law is one of the top salespeople for um, a brick and stone company that's local, and he's kind of climbed the ranks since he's been there. And he just started showing up on one Monday. He showed up in the office. I forget if he had somebody who had worked there, like a friend who invited him to come and have a conversation, sit down for an interview, whatever. The interview didn't actually happen, so he's just there and he just starts working, and then he shows up every day. And then on Friday, the boss is walking in and he's like going up the stairs, and he looks, he's like, "You've been here all week." It's like, "Yeah." It's like, "Are you on the payroll?" "No." "Well, just go talk to this person."
That's awesome.
And he got the job.
Yeah. So I have a similar story. I'm coming out of undergrad. Katie, my wife, is going to go to school in Dallas. Well, okay, so now I got to figure out a job in Dallas. Well, we didn't live in Dallas. We live in Pennsylvania. And I went down to Dallas on a trip, and there was a company that I wanted to check out because I really truly just wanted to know what they did. Like I'd read about them and I had heard good things from one of my advisors. So it's like Friday afternoon, I randomly show up at the company, and I mean, I had a suit on, I looked professional and stuff, and I said, "Hi, my name's so and so. I learned about your company through this individual, a name that they would actually recognize." And I said, "And I just wanted to come and see what you all do, and I'm wondering if anybody's willing to just chat with me about the work that you do." Next thing you know, I'm having ice cream with them in their ice cream social, because every Friday afternoon they had an ice cream social just to hang out. So I'm having ice cream with them. I'm learning about the company, right? And then the next week they sent me an email and they're like, "Hey, so you mentioned that you were looking for a position in Dallas. We're wondering if you'd want to come work with us." And it's like I ended up not taking the job, but it was just completely random, and it was like a crazy interesting experience about how well this process might actually work for people. Like I thought it was fantastic. So 2 decent examples of that actually being somewhat true. All right, let's get to happiness. Let's choose some happiness here.
Okay, cool. So the next chapter 9, is choosing happiness. And the thing that I took away from this chapter is not to second guess your decisions. There's no right choice. There's only right choosing. Basically follow the process, which is step 1, gather and create options. Step 2, narrow down the list. Step 3, choose discerningly. And then step 4 is let go and move on. They talk about standard step 4 is agonize over the choice that you made. And that's totally what I naturally do. Should I have bought the other one?
I've got a buddy who's doing this right now, and he's like, "Well, I don't know if I should." And I'm like, "Come on, man, just let go and move on." And I use the book immediately. So
yeah, so I think that's useful, but I don't think that there's a whole lot that we need to really talk about from this chapter. They talk about grokking, which is interesting. It's not the first place that I heard about this, but grokking is understanding something deeply and completely. And then once you grok something, like disconnect from it, move on, is kind of the thing that they're talking about. You don't need to know absolutely everything. At least that's my interpretation of it, is like there's a certain level of comprehension, and once you reach that for most things, you can disconnect from that now and move on to the next thing.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you that it was a fine chapter, but nothing stood out to me, so I'm okay to move to 10.
All right. So then the next one, chapter 10, is failure immunity. And that title is maybe a little bit clickbaity. Some of these titles are clickbaity. Like chapter 7, how not to get a job, is very clickbaity.
Yes, it is.
Failure immunity basically is about being resilient enough or anti-fragile enough to endure whatever failure you happen to encounter. So they mention it's impossible to never fail, but you can become immune from it, avoid the negative feelings that come with it. And that I think I agree with. They talk about Grit by Angela Duckworth, which was a phenomenal book that we covered a long time ago for Bookworm, and was something that came out of that was this hard things chart that my family started doing. So I'm very much in alignment with the core message of this chapter. They have this visual of be, do, become, and it's like this circle, which I think is interesting because, do you become something or do you do something first? It's kind of like a chicken and an egg scenario. It's kind of how they describe it. Well, there's not any one thing. There's this cycle. So you have to do the thing, then you become the type of person that translates into the identity. So it's almost like the identity based habits from Atomic Habits. There's a lot of good stuff in this chapter, to be honest. One other thing is the two kinds of game, the finite
Yep.
and the infinite games. We did the Infinite Game by Simon Sinek a while back, but they mentioned another book. I forget the title of it, but I did buy it, and it came the other day of the as the kind of like the canonical source of the finite versus infinite games.
Yeah, I actually think it's called Finite and Infinite Games. I think that's the
Yes.
actual title for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to reading that one, but since you already covered one on that for Bookworm, I'm probably not going to read it for this.
Gotcha. No, I really like this section. So the concept that I've always heard when it came around failure is fail forward fast. And the reason wasn't that you want to like that you want to fail. Like nobody wants to fail, but they cover it really well that failure is a part of life. You accept the fact that failure is a part of life. And as long as you're moving forward and you're learning something from that, okay, great. And then they're in the startup world. So when I was teaching entrepreneurship education, the idea of failing forward fast allowed you to get through a lot of those hurdles that the longer they took, the more of your bandwidth they spun down, or the more of your runway they spun down. So if we can learn the mistakes early and we learn from those and go forward, that's a benefit. That's a win. So it's a way to reframe failure in your mind, from a thing that harms you to a thing that helps you move forward. I really, really like the finite and infinite games. So the finite game is one in which we play by the rules in order to win, and when we don't win, then boom, it hurts us, it hits us hard. But an infinite game, one in which we play by the rules for the joy of getting to keep playing. So, okay, I failed, but I'm still playing. Like nobody told me I couldn't come back to work. Nobody told me I couldn't, still do whatever it was I wanted to do. I just made a mistake, right? Like, okay, I made a mistake. I learned from that and I move on. And I really, really like that concept. I think the reframe exercise, the failure reframe exercise, is one that I'll add to my action items list, because you log your failures, you categorize your failures, and then you identify what I can grow from those. And I think the identify what I can grow from those is the huge step there. That if I log them and I categorize them, I still can feel the failure pretty hard. But if I go, oh, this is teaching me this. So for instance, I'm really bad at email. So every time I flub up on an email and I don't send it back in time, right? If I reframe that and say, what could I learn from this? Oh, I learned from this that if it takes me less than 30 seconds to respond to an email, I should respond to it right now. Like, don't wait. Don't say I'm going to respond to it later today, because it's only 30 seconds and that's important to that person. And it's only 30 seconds. It's not going to take me that much time. When they're longer, sure, push them off. But like, that's an example of where I would use this concept. But I really like this section. I thought, because I think failure is a big thing that hits a lot of people. And I had some really practical tips from a life standpoint that helps you move forward.
Yeah, I like this section a lot. The next one I like even more, though. So anything else from chapter 10?
No, because I'm interested to hear what you say. I did not like this section as much. I did not like 11 as much.
All right, chapter 11 is building a team. And I won't say that this is the best section in terms of the content, but it definitely got me thinking the most. I have a couple of action items from this one chapter. So the basic idea here is that you live and design your life in collaboration with others. Life design is a communal effort. And you should identify the players or the people that are on your team. Those could be supporters who you can count on to care about your life. Players are active participants in your life projects. Intimates are your close family and friends. And then there's the team, the people that you're sharing the specifics of your life design with, who all track with you on regular intervals. The team's focus is on supporting life design, nothing more, nothing less. And that reminds me a lot of like a mastermind group. I've been a part of both good and bad mastermind groups. The good ones, really, when you create that alignment around why are we gathering together and everyone is there to give more than they take, then some really awesome stuff can happen. That kind of leads into one of my action items, but I'm going to pin that for now because there's another piece to this, which is the mentor piece. And the mentor piece is different than people who are going to give me advice. There's a difference between advice and counsel. Advice is like, well, yeah, you could do this, but if you don't want to do it or you're not going to follow it, no skin off my nose. Like a lot of the stuff that people make on the internet is advice. A lot of the things in books are advice, but mentors offer counsel because they're invested in the outcome and they have discernment. They can see the long view and the local view is kind of how they describe it. But a mentor is someone who is committed. There's like that story of the chicken who wants to start the restaurant with the pig. He's like, we'll sell bacon and eggs. And the pig's like, no, thanks. And he's like, well, why not? Because the pig says to the chicken, you're involved, but I'm committed.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yep.
A mentor is committed. So both of my action items here. Number one, identify who are my mentors. And like you can have mentors for different aspects of your life. The second one, and the reason that I put this one to the end, and I kind of teased it, is I feel like the mentorship and the mastermind piece are a little bit related for me in that I want to reboot my community. I shared with you before we hit record that I've been making payments on MikeSchmitz.com. It's finally mine. I control the domain. I can point it wherever I want it to go. And so I've been doing the faith-based productivity community. I've had the Obsidian University community. Bookworm had its own community a while back. It was too much to have all those in all the different places. And I wasn't doing I wasn't adding as much value as I could in those places because it was a whole bunch of other places to check. But I'm also a full-time creator. People are asking, like, where can I go to support your work? And I'm like, well, if you want to support this, go over there. You want to support that, go over there. No, that's too much. So I'm actually going to consolidate it all into a single community at MikeSchmitz.com. So at some point there will be the book notes from the Bookworm community. That's all going to be there. But I also want to build in some of this accountability and even some of this mentorship. Like I would love to facilitate some mastermind groups for people. Not that I'm, exceptional at it, but I feel like I understand the process enough that I could facilitate a pretty awesome mastermind group if we got the right people who were really invested in it and they understood why they were there. So I want to be able to set that stuff up and help other people with that. And there will be lots of details to be coming with that. But I've reached the point as we record this anyways, that I'm going to do this now. It's just what exactly is this gonna look like?
Nice. So who, as you're thinking through that, right? And I should say it, who, do you have supporters, players in mind for that? Like, do you have people in mind as you develop those things? You don't have to tell who they are, but do you have people in mind for those?
Not really. Partly because I feel like they're different than they would have been 6 months ago.
Really?
So everything has kind of been in a state of flux for me, and I need to kind of nail this down. It's a good idea to figure that stuff out. So that's actually the action item, is to start planning my community. But that will be a piece of it, is like who's there, because they've been separate. There've been a handful of people who are like, I want to help with this or whatever I can do, that sort of thing, and I really appreciate that, and I want to plug those people in. But I also need to figure out kind of the characteristics of the community, which I thought this was sort of interesting from this section too. They talk about community as being invested in one another's lives. So characteristics of community: you've got a kindred purpose, you have an explicit mission. I think anyone who's followed me for any length of time knows that my thing is kind of values-driven productivity. Faith would be another way to say it, but really it's just belief that if you design your life the right way and you do the right things, you're going to get the right results. A growth mindset, constantly learning, constantly trying to get better, and then meet regularly, share common ground, have the right intention and purpose, which again is like, in my opinion, give more than you take.
Yeah.
You add all that stuff together, you could create a pretty awesome community with some pretty cool people in it. And so that's going to be my next project.
Nice. So my encouragement to you would be, what should you prototype for that project?
Well, the prototype is going to be setting up the new community in a separate instance of Circle. I know Circle is the one that I want to use. Okay. And then start bringing things over. And the first thing that needs to be brought over is all of my book notes.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, what people can do, I've kind of revamped my newsletter lately, and I've been sharing a different book note, a PDF, every single week. So um, the way to sign up for that, I believe, is to go to obsidianuniversity.com. But again, eventually that'll be MikeSchmitz.com. And then I'll share that stuff. But then the community is going to have like the archive with all that stuff in there. So I guess if I would have to pick one single step, like where do I go from here? It's set up that community and then bring over all those book notes, because that's going to be the majority of the time for me to export all that stuff and bring it all over. I mean, there's a whole lot more to do, all the courses and all that kind of stuff too, but that's step one.
Yeah. Okay. Good. It does. Does MikeSchmitz.com right now have a place for people to like tell you they're interested or what they'd want or anything like that? Give you any feedback, or is that too far down the road?
It doesn't. You can give me an action item right now, I guess, before this goes live, turning that into like a landing page so people can say, yeah, I'm interested in this when it launches. I should definitely do that. So
Yeah. I just think that's a very low way, like a low risk and or prototype to be like, oh, there are actually people interested in this, right? Like, you know,
yeah,
because I think you're gonna get good feedback from there. So
cool. Yeah, I'll add that as an action item I'm committing right now. That link will be in the show notes.
nice. All right. So my key takeaway with building a team was this idea of counsel, which you covered very, very well. I don't really think I got a ton more out of this. I told you I wasn't super interested in this section. Not that a team's not important, and not that I don't really, really value a team, because I do. I think I just got to the point during, at this book where I was kind of like, okay, like I get it, and I was ready to move on. So we can move on to conclusion and then style and rating and wrap it up.
All right. Sounds good. So the conclusion is called A Well-Designed Life. And a couple key ideas from here. First, balance happens over time, which I think is really important because everyone wants to lead a quote unquote balanced life. I actually think with the 12-week year, the whole idea of intentional imbalance is better, but overall, they're right. What you want over a long period of time is balance. Moment to moment, you're not necessarily balanced. You're going all in with something or other, but there's constantly these ebbs and flows.
Well, and I would say, yeah, like I would say with the intentional imbalance, informed imbalance is okay, right? Like if you can cognitively process that, like, oh, this season of my life will be very stressful or very heavy in this section, but I can see the end of that, and it's not going to be forever. So that makes sense.
Exactly. The other thing they talk about is personal practices, which reminded me of routines, and specifically my morning routine. I feel like needs a reboot, shall we say. Not that there's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be changed with it, but I really need to reconsider my morning routine and probably make a few adjustments to that. So that's another action item that I had, was to examine my my morning routine, possibly my evening routine too, but the morning routine is the one that I know could benefit from some TLC.
Yeah, I think two ideas came out of this one. This conclusion for me is one, that basically it's a process. So accept the process, acknowledge the process, and dive into the process, and just keep iterating on this process and keep iterating on this process. So one of the things I really value about the way the authors did this book is the design principles are, integrated into this book. They are weaved in tightly into this book, and I like that. I appreciated that about that, because it's just such a natural fit, but we just don't often think about it from a life standpoint, from a work standpoint. We think about it, or at least for me, I think about it from like product design, system design, those kind of things. The second one is basically they acknowledge that this is a how book. This is not a what or why book, and I really appreciate that about that. So, they make the quote, "In life design, we only take on questions of how to design your life, what life you should live, or why one life is better than others." And I think that is a very, very valuable statement and a very honest statement for them to make, and I really like that they made it. It almost like put a pretty bow at the end of the book that said, okay, like this all just sits so much better with me. Now that we're at the end. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I agree. Great way to end the book. Let's go to action items. So I've got 5 of them.
I was going to say, you were just rattling them off there, man. Like you're all kind of action items on this.
Yeah. Well, the first one I think might actually already be done. Check out a Designing Your Life workshop. I looked up the website for this. They're super expensive, and I don't think I'm going to go anywhere and do one of these anytime soon. Second one is to create those engagement, energy, and flow mind maps. I think that might be a long-term one, and I'll add to those over time, but I want to start those. Number 3, make a list of my mentors. Number 4, start planning my community and create a landing page before the episode goes live.
Yeah.
And then the last one is to examine my morning routine. What do you got?
Yeah. Well, so one comment on yours. This is a big part of what we do. I told you we do a similar, but it's actually the more now that I've read, fully through the book, our workshop is very different. It just uses a couple concepts, similar concepts from what they do, but the energy and the flow maps and those type of things, you'll get a lot of value out of those. That's worth your time. I understand it may not be a priority in the next week or two, but you'll get a lot of value out of those. The other thing is
Awesome.
the mentor map, and just remembering who all is in your network and what it sounds so transactional, but like what value they could bring to the things you're thinking about or the things you're working through. Those are really valuable. My action items. So I want to identify the gravity and the anchor problems in my life, and I want to try to categorize those, because there are these things that at times kind of frustrate me, and I kind of think, wow, well, like I want to work on that, I want to fix that, I want to do that thing, and I've never ever thought about, well, is it fixable, or is it an action, or is it an anchor problem where the way I've been approaching it is just the wrong way to approach it, and I need to really go through a brainstorm session on how I might be able to approach that, and I think that would be a very valuable activity for me. So I want to think through those nagging things, and what are they? Maybe 3 of them, if I can find 3 of them or whatever, and think through what kind of problem they are and try to classify those. The next one would be to think about my last 3-ish failures, right? And I want to do that reframe exercise, that failure reframe exercise, and say, okay, this was the failure. Can I categorize it into a type of failure? And then what did I learn from it, or what can I do to progress forward in that failure? So I think those 2 would be valuable right now for me.
Nice. All right. Style and rating. And I picked this one, so I'll go first. I think the style is very approachable. I feel like they did a great job of condensing down the class. The book itself is well designed. It's very visual. You mentioned at the beginning the call outs with the wrong mindsets and the reframes. That's really helpful. There's a lot of exercises built in. There's short summaries at the end of each chapter. It's very well done for someone who is coming into this topic and they're trying to grok the concept, to borrow one of their terms. It's written in a way that you can do that very easily, I feel. Because it's so visual, because there's so many examples and images and exercises, it's pretty easy to get through the meat of the book. I don't think you're probably getting the majority of the benefit until you go through with the exercises. However, I don't really want to go through the exercises.
Yep.
I feel like I understand the concepts of them, and I've got my own versions of these already. So actually the weird thing about this is I came into this kind of feeling like, what can they teach me about designing my life? And I walk away thinking like, I need to write a version of this book.
Nice. Action
I don't have the
item.
credentials. I'm not teaching a Stanford class, but there's a lot of the things that they're talking about. And I'm just like, that's not the best way to do that. So I guess I gotta get over my own limiting beliefs, because I struggle with that a lot. It's like, well, who am I to actually talk about this stuff? I'll let Bill Burnett and Dave Evans do it because they worked at Apple and they're Stanford teachers. But I don't know. I mean, there's stuff that I like here. There's stuff I don't like here. And there's probably people like me who would resonate more with my take on this. I kind of had the same thing after reading Hero on a Mission. It's like, there's some good stuff here. It's not how I would do it. That's kind of what this reminds me of. So I do like the book. I do think I would recommend it. I think I'll give it 4 stars. I don't think it's the right revolutionary thing for me. Like if I were to go through and do all these exercises, I don't think those exact exercises are the thing that's going to unlock things for me. However, they're definitely in the same vein as a lot of like the life theme stuff that I really am passionate about. So I like the concept. I like that this book exists. I think it's a great starting point. It's not the place that I would end with a lot of this stuff. But if you're coming into this concept, I think it's a good one to pick up.
Yeah. So I'll put the put the end first, 4 stars as well. So that's exactly what I had in my head, because I think there's a lot of really good value in here. I think the fundamental concepts that you can get out of this book or you can glean from this book are really, really valuable, and they'll change the way you think, especially if you've never thought about this. I can, similar to you, some of the exercises I can give and take, right? Some of them I think are more valuable than others. I think if you have nowhere to start, this is a great way to start doing these things. But I also think that you might run into some trouble if you're not doing it with a facilitator, you're not doing it with someone with experience. So I think there may need to be a little bit more. And as you said, the bar between read the book and do the workshop, I mean, it's big. Like the gap between there, because the workshop is expensive. I mean, they very much have a consulting business out of this, that is very lucrative, if you will. So, or at least it seems that way. I don't know if it is or not, but it seems that way.
They're definitely making more money off of their workshops than I'm making off the Life Theme cohort. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So then we get to the dysfunctional beliefs and the reframes, and I think revisiting those every so often would be a really valuable thing. So I think there's a lot of value contained in this book. I would totally pull out or rework chapter 7 and 8. I just thought they felt odd. So I would go, I'd go 4 out of 5.
Awesome. All right, let's put Designing Your Life on the shelf. What's next?
So I get to pick the next book now that I'm official, which is fun. And I want to do Learn Like a Pro by Barbara Oakley and Olav, and I think it's Shway is how you say his last name, Olav Shway. So Learn Like a Pro, and we're going to get some strategies on how to learn, effective strategies to learn. And I think it's just going to be a really practical, tangible book for folks that are always interested in learning something new. So I think it's going to be an exciting read. It's a little bit of a shorter read, which for some of you, you'll be very happy about that. But I think it's going to be a really valuable book. So that's what we're going to do next.
Nice. All right. And then the one after that, I'm going to pick based on a recommendation, and that is Influence by Robert Cialdini. There's an updated version of this. I read this a while back, and this is one of those books that I feel maybe gets a bad rap because the sleazy internet marketer people have taken this too far.
Okay.
The other thing that kind of stands out to me from that vein is like the Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like I know a lot of people who really don't understand the concept of that book, and they refer to that as like, oh, well, that's a manipulative book. And I don't think that's necessarily true. It's one of the better books that I've read, to be honest. So I read Influence a long time ago. To be honest, it was before Bookworm, and I don't remember anything about it.
Okay.
So I'm looking forward to going back through this one. And the same person who recommended this actually also recommended the one that you had picked, which is Learn Like a Pro. And you brought this one up to me without knowing that this was also a recommendation by Mark. So Mark, you get a twofer on the next couple books from your recommendations. So thanks for sending those in.
Yeah, Mike, just so the listeners know, are we doing the updated version, the newer publication version?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's do the new one.
Okay.
I have no idea what is updated about it, but that's the one that I just ordered today. It's the updated version.
Fantastic. And then, so now that I'm official, I guess we get to do gap books, right? Which there's always a gap book. I don't know if Mike has one or not. I don't. But I am reading one. It's called Triumph of the Lamb, and it's actually for a Bible study that I'm leading on Fridays. So, it's a fun book. It's a kind of a crazy book in terms of introducing new concepts to me. But that's the gap book that I'm reading in between at this time.
Yeah, so I do actually have one that I'm going to start reading today. It's one that was recommended to me a long time ago by my friend Ernie. And when I was asking people, what should I do with these communities? Basically, the advice that I got was, you're crazy if you don't consolidate it under your own name. That's what everybody wants to do. The whole idea behind story brand for like big companies and brands is that they want to be more personal. Why would you not just lean into like who you are? That's why people follow you. So this book I had on my bookshelf and feels like the perfect complement to the whole action item with setting up the community and what's MikeSchmitz.com going to look like. And that is You Are the Brand by Mike Kim. And I honestly don't know anything about this book other than it's been recommended to me and seemed to potentially contain some solutions to problems that I'm wrestling with. So I'm going to try and read that one before for Learn Like a Pro.
Okay.
All right. So thanks everyone for listening along. As I mentioned, and Cory pressured me to do, I'll set up the landing page for the community. And if you sign up for that, that'll get you on the email list. And in the meantime, you can get my book notes that way. But if you are reading along with us, please pick up Learn Like a Pro by Barbara Oakley and Olav Shwe. And we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.